Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Fireside, Access All Areas. We're joined tonight by Phipps and Cathy O'Dowd, who set many records in outdoor challenges, accessing in areas and experiences doing so which are excluded to many. Cathy and Aaron will share, we hope, what those experiences have meant to them both, what's helped them to achieve their goals, and what they've learned from those challenges along the way. On our expeditions for the last 90 years, young people have generally been divided up into groups that we call fires. They were named fires by our founder, George Murray Levitt, right back in 1932. A fire was, I think, normally about 12 people, which was a sort of perfect shoulder to shoulder and safe distance from the embers circle around the campfire at night. Whilst many expeditions now don't have campfires for lots of reasons, often environmental, we treasure that sense of the campfire, a kind of welcoming social space where you can convene, normally at the end of the day, on similar terms and without any ceremony, to listen, absorb, share ideas, learn more about yourselves and more about each other. These firesides that you've joined us for tonight have the same spirit in mind. They're a series of conversations with friends of British Exploring Society. Each fireside is completely different. They give us the chance to share unforgettable stories with remarkable people and help us bring some new audiences a little nearer the fire as well, we hope. The themes of our firesides resonate with our work as a charity and our concerns more widely as a community. We're really fortunate in our company, as you can tell. Our last conversation was with exceptional polar explorers and activists, Ben Saunders and Robert Swan, and tonight we're joined by more record breakers. Aaron and Cathy join us to talk about what they've gained through the defining experiences they have had in wild and remote places. We're also going to try and chew over how those experiences have informed their careers, how they feel about the complex issues of accessibility, because they are complex. Does this mean access all areas, for example? And about how the conflicting issues in the fight for fairer access can actually raise other experiences, other issues as well. Now, our fireside guests are here to be honest, if they can be, to share their insights, and we'll be encouraging you to join the conversation with your questions to them both as we go. Aaron and Cathy both believe they've had transformative, life-defining experiences in the outdoors as adults. Now, we work with young people to access these kinds of privileging experiences, and they're often from diverse backgrounds, facing educational and economic disadvantage, living with mental and physical impairment. And we work with remarkable professional volunteer leaders to help these young people find their fire, as we call it, developing trust, their sense of personal value, agency, purpose, and drive. We want our young people to stick with us as part of our community so that as they progress through life, they can continue to draw on the support of their fellow explorers. Our work has honestly never felt more urgent and relevant than right now. There are growing gaps in the life chances of young people from different parts, even of our small island. So we'd like to show you just a really brief video now about what we get up to and why. And after that, I'll say a little more about our amazing fireside guests. And then I'm going to pass the mic to Aaron and then to Cathy, who are each going to talk for about 5 minutes about their individual experiences before we get together and tackle some questions together, hopefully with you joining in. So here's that video first.
British Exploring Society is always trying to find a new challenge for leaders and young people.
It made my world a lot bigger, and by that, I've had a very restricted childhood, and I was from a poor background. I'd never been abroad. I didn't have a passport. I hadn't seen much of the world, and so my up until then my world was very small.
While on expeditions, we are in amazing locations, in beautiful places that not many people have access to.
And what did it give me access to? I just noted a few words down, just the wildness of being in Svalbard, around mountains, the sense of being in a place that was untamed, climbing mountains that no one had ever climbed before. It's very difficult to put into words what that meant.
But before the trip, I was in a very bad headspace, despite having a supportive family. And by the time I got back, I found that actually, I know it's cheesy, but I'd really developed as a person, and I came out a lot more positive than I went in. And it's still kind of continued to the current day.
Going on expedition enhanced and developed my resilience, as I sort of now have had to sort of get on with life and not let sort of the uncertainty of life sort of put me down.
It has given me a great thing to look back on and reflect on, and without fail it puts a smile on my face thinking back of those memories on expedition, and it's kind of my go-to when I need to think of something positive and something that I appreciate.
I have so many incredible memories from different British exploring expeditions, and even from training weekends and meeting young explorers for the first time.
Being part of this community is being able to share one's experiences and being able to talk to lots of kind of like-minded people.
The community that makes up British exploring is a wonderful mix of people from all age groups and with all sorts of levels of expertise, but with one common goal of providing great adventures and experiences for young people.
It's a group of people who for decades have been experiencing these same kinds of expeditions and learning the same sorts of things from them. And there's so much to learn from everyone you meet, all the leaders that come on expeditions, the young explorers themselves, everyone involved in the organisation has interesting stories to tell.
So now back to some more very interesting stories. Aaron Phipps was born in 1983 and is now a wheelchair rugby player and a freshly minted gold medal winning Paralympian. Aaron lost his legs and most of his fingers as a direct result of meningitis and sepsis as a young man. Following extended hospitalization and recovery, Aaron began to get involved in wheelchair races, and by 2009, he'd nailed 2 London marathons and was actually getting impressive top 5 rankings in them too. It's probably no surprise to learn that by 2016, Aaron had become the first disabled British person to scale Mount Kilimanjaro. He was told that he had to be carried up as the wheelchair that he had with him wasn't actually capable of traversing the mountain. So Aaron decided to take his own approach. He donned knee pads and used his hands and knees to reach the top without any assistance, which is an astonishing achievement. Cathy O'Dowd is a South African rock climber, mountaineer, author. I think she's written and co-written 2 books, as well as numerous articles, and she's a motivational speaker too. She's climbed since college, took part in her first expedition when she was a mere 21 years old to the Rwenzori in Central Africa, and was the very first woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest from both the south and north sides in 96 and 99, and I think also made a subsequent attempt on the east side, I think that's right, of Mount Everest as well. Now, they're going to now tell you some more about themselves because let's face it, they're here, so they're better placed than anyone else to do that job for you. So again, for no other reason than alphabetical, can I now please first hand you over to Aaron to talk about his experiences? And I'm sure we were all particularly interested to understand how your recent Paralympic adventures and triumphs may have added to your perspectives on the restrictions and opportunities you may have faced in your life. So Aaron, I think first over to you.
Thank you very much, Honor. Yes, I would just like to say I'm very proud of this. We never expected this to happen, but I've just got back from the Paralympics and we got this shiny gold medal. As I said, I really wasn't expecting to get this. I'd have been very happy with a medal, and the fact that we've got a gold medal is unbelievable. So I've got to get that in there now. So I'm sorry if I seem like I'm showing off, but to be honest with you, I'm showing off. So right, I'll put that away now because otherwise I just sit here holding it or wearing it. So yes, indeed. So Kilimanjaro started as a charity challenge, and it seemed like a good idea. I'd been playing wheelchair rugby up into 2012. And I'd taken a break because I had a very young family and trying to compete and work was difficult. And it was really an awareness piece for meningitis. So as Honor explained, I had sepsis or meningitis when I was 15, and we decided to take on the challenge. And the information that we were getting back, that it was going to be doable. It was going to be tough, but there was man-made paths on the mountain. You know, Kilimanjaro isn't the most technical mountain. It's nothing like Everest, as we'll hear from Cathy later, but it was potentially going to be doable. I should explain, so I'm an amputee. I've got prosthetic legs. I'm wearing it at the moment. Zoom's a great leveler, you'd never know, but should I try and get my leg in a picture? There you go. There's one of them anyway. So but I've got really bad scars on my legs, which means if I walk too much, then my legs get sore. So I was always going to have to do the challenge in a wheelchair. We flew out to Tanzania. It cost an awful lot of money, and we had a huge crew with us. So that's probably confrontation for a little while in terms of access. But it was a piece to raise awareness of meningitis, because it's still massive out in Africa, and a lot of people still unfortunately lose their life to the illness. We set off on the side of the mountain, and it was clear it wasn't going to work as we expected it to. Day one was meant to take between 2 and 3 hours to get to the very first camp. Didn't take between 2 and 3 hours, took us 6.5 hours. Camped overnight, and we set off on day two. Day two was meant to take between 4 and 5 hours, including a lunch break. Didn't take between 4 and 5 hours, took us 10.5 hours. So the next day, Joshua, the head guide, came to speak to me and was pulling that face, and you think this isn't going to go well. And that's when he said, Aaron, what's your goal? I said, well, it's to get to the top. He said, good, I'm glad that's your goal, but there's a problem. We're going to have to carry you. And there was just no way that was going to happen. I had a really technical piece of mountaineering equipment with me called duct tape, and I had a pair of knee pads with me as well. So I duct taped my knee pads to my legs, and I jumped out of my wheelchair and I started crawling, because there was no way I was going to get carried up the mountain, because I'm just really stubborn. So the first day of crawling on my hands and knees for 9.5 kilometers up the mountain, we got into camp and my legs were in pieces. I was in tears with the team doctor in the tent, and just kind of confided in her and said, there's no way I can get carried up this mountain. So we agreed at that point we'd go until we dropped almost. So I crawled on my hands and knees for the next 4 days to get to the summit. But to get to the top was one of the most amazing feelings in the whole world. And the proudest bit was it was my 2 little girls, Ella and Chloe, had made a poster that said, good luck, Daddy. I carried it all the way to the top and got to sit on top of that mountain and hold their poster and say, look what I've achieved. And funny enough, you get quite a good phone signal on top of Kilimanjaro. So we managed to connect to the Kenyan phone network. We're having a WhatsApp conversation with home and sharing those pictures with them. And that was one of the most amazing things for me. And we did kind of achieve our goal, because it blew up in the media, and it created a lot of awareness of meningitis. And, we managed to secure some vaccines and get them sent over to Africa, etc. So we were really proud of what we achieved. But in terms of access, it was restrictive, and it was pretty out of the ordinary in terms of a kind of an adventure as such, I guess.
Thank you. And in terms of where you've been recently, it's always very hard to follow an experience like that. Let's just chat about something else. In terms of your remarkable career subsequently, what have you learnt about what access might be like for other athletes living with disability? What some of the individuals you might have met when you were in the kind of Paralympic village? Did you have conversations about what it was like in other countries?
Absolutely. And the Paralympics is an amazing place. You see people from all walks of life, and you feel very privileged because they haven't always got the best mobility equipment. Funding isn't the same as it is. But for most people, they are incredibly envious of what we have in the UK. With the work that Channel 4 do to create awareness of disability, the way that Paralympic sport, they're just quite envious of what we have, because it's not the same around the world. Not everybody else gets the same access to the same facilities and the same training environment that we do, and just the way that the media and the public interact with us as well. It's changing a little bit now, but even in America, the Paralympics aren't live like they are here. They show an hour highlight reel, and that's America. There's lots of countries as well that, as I understand it, aren't very keen on hosting the Olympics, as they then have to host the Paralympics as well, and they just don't want to host it. So I think we're very lucky that we probably live in one of the most inclusive countries in the entire world now.
And do you feel that more now than before you left, or to the same extent?
Having the medal. Yeah, I mean, we had a homecoming at Wembley 2 days ago with 8,000 people there, and it was live on Channel 4 and everything else. So that's, as I was mentioned, around the world it isn't like that for everybody else. I feel very, very privileged with the support and the help that we get.
Aaron, thank you. Okay, Cathy, can we talk to you a little, please, about your experience of how you had your transformative adventures, and then we'll tackle some difficult.
Well, I thought I'd try and do 2 things at once, which is always ambitious, and fill in a little bit about my backstory while combining it with a blog post I wrote kind of around this theme, which I called Not All Adventurers Are Born Equal. Just from a time when I was running a side project about getting funding for expeditions. I was kind of really quite interested in who gets what and why, and some of the messaging around the outdoors and access to the outdoors. So I'm South African, mountain climber. I do other mountain sports, and got my break through a set of somewhat contrived events that led to me being the first South African to climb Everest. What I've seen in recent years, and I've now been in the space for 35 years, very long time. There's a lot of hashtag like stuff on Instagram, and it's all just do it and believe in yourself, start dreaming, stop dreaming, start doing, all sorts of inspirational seize the moment. All of which kind of carries a message around, if you're not doing this, it's your fault. You're the one who doesn't have the confidence, you don't have the courage. And some people can be inspired by this kind of call. I think other people can just feel it's impossible. It feels impossible for ways you can't even always quite articulate. So I started thinking about why. What are the impossible ways? I mean, I was South African, female, grew up in the suburbs of a city with parents who didn't do any of this stuff. So how do you get from there to being the first South African to climb Everest? Well, when we look at people getting into things, money does matter. And obviously, you having cash is very helpful. And, God knows, not all adventurers are young. So sometimes you were lucky in property, sometimes you inherited money, you got stock options, you started a company and managed to sell it, you spent 20 years in an investment banker. There are all sorts of ways. You might have ended up with money. And certain kinds of records depend, I think, very heavily on money. The Grand Slam fastest records, the fastest to do the 7 summits, the fastest to do the North Pole, the South Pole, and Everest. That's just money. Buying air tickets, buying guides, buying people to organize logistics for you. Youngest records, which might interest this audience, that's money. Teenagers are very seldom raising that money themselves from scratch. Either their parents paid for it, or their parents are CEO level in the city and called a few friends. They may seem to be doing it on sponsorship, but how did they get the sponsorship meetings? Where did the contacts come from? A lot of that is about family money, family contacts. Now, on the other hand, thinking about money, you don't have to be trying to climb Everest. You don't have to be doing expensive adventures. There's plenty of hashtagging, Instagram, $25 and a bicycle you got on a neighborhood swap scheme. What's holding you back? Just leave from your front door and pedal into the sunset. Yeah, okay, that's nice. What are you going to do when it goes wrong? And while my parents didn't pay for my trips, this one I absolutely had. Mostly when it goes wrong, you phone your parents in tears and they send you money by Western Union and they buy you an air ticket home. And they may or may not give you an I told you so lecture when you get home, but whatever, you get home. Plenty of people don't have that. Their parents don't have the money, or don't understand, or don't approve. It's a huge asset to have, and that I had in spades. They might not have understood why I was trying to climb mountains, but they were always like, we'll back you up, we'll bail you out of trouble, and we'll slip a little bit of extra money into your expedition fund, while we're at it. What some people get from parents, of course, is actual skills. That I didn't get. But if your parents are mountain guides, Arctic guides, huge head start. Another thing around youngest records. If you've been doing Arctic travel with your parents since you were 2, you are 20 years ahead of other young adults. Huge advantage. Then there are also things about citizenship, the country you live in. Here, I think the British have more advantages than they think. That passport of yours, even after Brexit, it's still a golden ticket compared to my third world African passport. The number of visas I need, the expense of getting visas. I was young in South Africa under sanctions, under apartheid. We couldn't travel. Initially, we couldn't even get permits for something like Everest because of sanctions. It's not just the passport, it's your kind of access to starting blocks. Britain, you have adventure grants. It's a huge advantage. You have clubs. You criminally underuse the clubs. They all offer subsidized training in all sorts of ways. Yes, you need a little bit of money to make it work, but there's a lot there. South Africa, there was nothing. No culture or very little culture of outdoors, nothing in the way of grants. But what we did get, I got university education at a time when it was very cheap, and my parents paid. Huge help. I started rock climbing at my university club. I did my first little expeditions through people I met at my university. And everyone had a little bit of extra cash. We didn't have to do internships in our summer holidays, particularly unpaid ones. We had the freedom. We didn't have huge student loans. We had the freedom to spend our holidays adventuring. Huge advantage. And it was that led me to have enough climbing experience that when they first advertised the first South African Everest expedition, and for reasons that were entirely about media coverage, they were looking for a woman to join, basically to sex up the expedition coverage in the media. And they ran a competition to find a girl. I was in a position, I had the experience and the confidence to apply. You have to be able to imagine yourself in the space. I will shut up in 2 minutes. I think I've overdone my 5 minutes. But very quickly, you need to imagine yourself in the space. For me, that was a book. Arlene Bloom, A Woman's Place is on the Face. The first all-woman expedition to the Himalaya. Having read her book for the first time, I thought, Himalayan climbing, it's not only men. I will say at that point, it was only white people. It was as a white South African, I could see myself in that space. As a black South African woman, you had almost no chance of even ever imagining that this was possible, and you certainly couldn't have paid for it. Then there are other things that matter. Being a man helps, being good looking helps, being physically abled helps, and being lucky helps. I only got on that Everest expedition because I applied. But 200 other women applied. Some of them were incredibly good. I got a lucky break. The expedition itself was wildly controversial, which wasn't fun, but got me in the media. And that started a ball rolling that is still rolling 25 years later. Without that break, who knows? So all I really say to people, there's a lot out there to inspire you, to help you, but don't beat yourself up for not matching what you see on Instagram or in the blogs or in the media. People start from very different places. And those of us who want to help other people need to acknowledge that as well. Meet them where they are and think about what's really holding people back. And then look at where you are now and work forward from that rather than compare yourself to where other people are and feel that you're failing. And I totally blew my 5 minutes.
But it was worth it. That was amazing. Thank you. Okay, right. So I suppose the first controversial question might be for you both, that something that you've alluded to, Cathy, and I don't know how fair this is that between you, you both bagged some very famous pointy things, Kilimanjaro and Everest, in very different circumstances, but they were both media candy in very different ways. And the records you broke were, and no one would want to belittle the extraordinary achievements you've made, but I think you've previously both acknowledged that there is something very appealing to certain forms of media about the challenges that you tackled, and that having tackled them, even though they draw very specific attention to one specific thing in both of your careers, even though you've gone on to do so many before and after so many other things, that in a way that they have been disproportionately pivotal in your success. How do you both feel about that? I mean, do you think it would be all right for us to just make those two mountains accessible to everyone? Would that fix everything for everyone who wanted to get outdoors? I don't know how either of you feel about that. Aaron?
I mean, Kili was an amazing experience, but I mean, if you could make that accessible to everybody, even just the practical elements of, you know, of how much waste would end up on the mountain. I mean, we hear about that on Everest all the time now, don't we? I think one of the big things I've learned, and this isn't completely answering your question, to be honest with you, but it's going off on a bit of a tangent, so I apologize. But actually, for me, it's always been about the adventure, but then the way I've shared that with my family and the people around me. So although I ended up at Kili, and like you said, that ended up in a massive media hook, and it really helped with the meningitis messages. Really, for me, on a personal level, it was about sitting at the top of that mountain holding my girl's poster. Winning the gold medal at the Paralympics, although I was showing off with it earlier and being a bit of a wally, it was the bit I loved the most. And when I go on to speak about that, I'm going to show the video when all my family go bananas at home, and they're going to set me off if I keep talking about this, sorry. So I think your mountain is your mountain. And it's a bit of a cliche to say that you find your own mountain, but you know, it's about the people you love and the journeys that you go on. It doesn't have to be Kili or Everest specifically. It can be whatever it is for you. And then, you know, if you choose to share that on Instagram, that's great. You know, I don't put too much on there, but you know, you can find your own adventures.
Yeah, I agree. The answer is some kind of wishy-washy in the middle space, because even though the mountains themselves are relatively immutable, how we interact with them by so-called adventure changes year by year. There's no going back to what George Mallory and co did in sort of 1921, where they had to sail to Calcutta and walk for 6 weeks to try and find Everest. And if you died on the route, it was just like you died and somebody sent a letter home. It might eventually arrive to tell your wife what had happened. There's no going back to that. And, you know, the likes of Reinhold Messner have said no one should be allowed to climb Everest if you're not doing it solo without oxygen. I mean, by a new route. He's done it. So, you know, that's a world standard. Maybe we shouldn't allow anyone who can't do that. I climbed it with Sherpa support and with oxygen, but at least we still actually climbed it. Now there's a fixed safety line from base camp to the summit. You don't even need to bring an ice axe. You just pay quite a lot of money to join one of the guided teams and make sure you clip into the safety line facing uphill, and off you go. I think we'll have helicopter access. We've already had one helicoptered halfway up Everest. Within 2 decades, we'll have helicopter access to the summit or close to the summit.
So is there something dangerous about, because there's something implied there, and Aaron's already talked about it, about money. Does money trump personal achievement always? Is it possible for money to buy you anything? Because it starts to look like it, doesn't it? And potentially in a very detrimental way in terms of the environment, because we all know, I mean, Aaron was very explicit about it, you know, there are some very ugly things happening to some of our most precious wildernesses, and it appears to be because people want to emulate the likes of you both, but they may not have time, so they think they can buy it. I mean, what would your responses be to that? I hate to put you on the spot.
No, that's not putting me on the spot. I'm happy to answer. And I think, I think when the Instagram picture becomes that important, we've got a huge problem on our hands. And that's probably a societal thing, to be honest. It's, if people are prepared to buy their way up these experiences, it's about the journey.
Ooh. What a terrible moment to lose in.
Yeah, I think Aaron is frozen in the moment.
It's about the journey and the things I learned, I share with my children. Am I back?
You're back. You're back.
Apologies, everyone. Where did I get to?
You were just about to launch into an absolutely poetic moment of
oh, and then it completely
and then froze.
Oh, apologies. I just wanted to say that I just think it's really sad now that the Instagram picture in some ways has become more important than the journey. And it's the journey that is the important bit. That's where you learn, and that's where you grow as an individual, and that's where you have your experiences. Just to get picked up like a grabbing toy machine, like the machine in Toy Story. It's you, off you go, and money be a part of that. I think that's a huge problem, and I think that's more of a societal thing. It scares me, to be honest.
Cathy?
I think I'm going to push back very slightly. Clearly, money buys you lots. Money buys you the first space tourism, and we see who that's gone to, the 3 male billionaires of the world. But in the old days, the sort of British golden years of adventuring, in mountaineering, let's be blunt, you had to be a certain type of chap. First of all, you had to be white, British, male, and a certain class. The reason the likes of Joe Brown wasn't popular when he first came into climbing, he wasn't quite the kind of chap who was a member of the Royal Geographical Society. And the British claim the first Everest ascent, despite it being done by the guy they brought in from New Zealand to do the actual work, oh yes, and the Sherpa from Nepal. So what buying places on expeditions gets you is a more level playing field. Now, women and people of color and people from all 200 countries in the world can all get onto the mountains because it's money that's your access rather than your skin color or your nationality or your class or a whole lot of other kind of unspoken barriers. So money has actually made it a lot more democratic. I also think with both Everest and Kili, one of the reasons they're crowded is because Nepal and Tanzania do not have a lot else to sell. They are poor countries. There are not a lot of great jobs. People talk about the Sherpas on Everest like, oh, it's such a dangerous job. They're being exploited. Young Nepali man, if you're not working in the tourism industry in Nepal, you're on the building sites in Qatar, and that's a lot worse. Being a Sherpa, sort of an Everest climbing Sherpa is actually a good deal better than being on Middle Eastern construction sites. So some of this is driven by poverty. And if Nepal and Tanzania had other things for their young men to do, they might not be pushing tourists up their mountains to the same extent. So money in adventure is complicated. It allows access, it feeds into our global inequality. Coming right back to the question, I don't think we can allow everything to be accessible to everybody. If you had a wheelchair accessible route up Everest, it's possible. We have the engineering capability to do it. I don't think anybody would be that excited about doing it, despite it giving greater accessibility. So we're stuck with this balance between trying to preserve the outdoors, but also trying to find ways to get people into the outdoors. And maybe it's about being more creative about how we get people in and where we go in and what we defined as high value outdoors that we're seeking.
And I think that's a nice place to, and thank you, that's a nice way for us to extend back to that idea of what we mean about the value, the idea of purposeful adventure, purposeful exploration. And I wanted to ask you both a bit more about the idea of this muscle that you've both exercised, this idea of resilience, and whether it's something that it's like this idea of adversity and the drive that you both seem to have got from it, whether you think somehow you were born with it, you acquired it, you had it and it got bigger as a result of the experiences that you've had. Does it work for everyone to be subject to kind of adversity in the ways that you both have been? In other words, is this part of a sort of educational cure-all for everybody? Does everyone benefit from it if we get the timing right? Can everyone find the self they want to be in the outdoors?
I would never have taken these opportunities if it wasn't the fact that I was poorly. I was making some pretty negative choices as a teenager, and I don't really know my route my life would have gone down if I hadn't have been ill. But that, like you said, adversity gave me a drive to try different things. I'd never would have had the strength to become a Paralympian. I never would have taken the opportunity to climb Kilimanjaro. So the opportunities that I took came from that. Is it right to say that everybody could do that? No, the thing I've learned is it's really good to say yes to things and yes to opportunities. Sadly, I had to go through this catastrophic event to then go and do that, but other people don't have to do that, you know. And you're gonna have people on the call now who are perhaps listening and thinking about maybe trying something new, going on a different adventure with you guys. And I, wholeheartedly say yes, do that. Put yourself out your comfort zone, because that's when life gets interesting. And again, I'm going off on a tangent here, but yeah, Kilimanjaro, literally, it started by them saying, Aaron, do you fancy Kilimanjaro? And me going, yeah, all right. And I think saying, yeah, all right to things sometimes, as scary as it might be, don't think about it, just say yeah and see where it ends up.
It's interesting. And Cathy, what do you think?
I think it must be some balance of innate characteristics and opportunity. Certainly, I feel as if some of my kind of interest and focus is innate to who I am. It didn't come through my family particularly. But what I did get from my family is when I came home with weird ideas, they were like, really? You sure about this? Followed by, okay, how can we help? What do you need? My parents were not judgmental and were actually incredibly supportive. And I only realized later in life how much of a gift that was, particularly when I was the only daughter and they'd already had a son die. So it was an incredible gift from fairly conventional parents. And I got gifts through the club I joined as at university, who were supportive, through a group of men who were supportive, even though it was still a fairly sexist time in the outdoor space. Most of the men I've climbed with have been great. I got a lot of opportunities to let my own innate interest in this flower in positive ways rather than be crushed. But I don't think the outdoors should be sold as some kind of magic panacea for everybody. I think it would do a lot of people a great deal of good. I think there are a lot of people who don't have the opportunity who should get it and would get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
And I think we will have better luck kind of trying to preserve the environment when more people are personally, intimately connected. But I also think there's something to be said for going on a British Exploring Society trip, going like, my God, never again. Even if what you come away from it is, I survived, thank God. And okay, I learned a few things about myself, and hell, I'm an urban person. Let's embrace that and move forward.
Yeah,
it's an okay thing to learn from trying something.
Yes, we describe what we do as type 2. And for anyone who's not familiar with that expression, it's that idea of, yes, on reflection and with delayed gratification, the experience of knowing what you are capable of doing doesn't necessarily mean that you wish to repeatedly go back and do it again. I'd like to, we're starting to get some really interesting comments in from some of our listeners and our other people around the campfire tonight. I particularly want to allude to one from one of our guests who's talking about, again, the issue of money, and talking about the idea that making money making money through the wilderness might exclude that experience from other, particularly young people, because the outdoors can have such an incredible impact on young people's lives. And they've said that we should never let money become more valuable than people's lives. And I think we'd all agree that. actually passionately agree that. It's one of the things that I'd want to respond to that, in that when the British Exploring Society, I think, has worked incredibly hard to change our entire funding model so that now literally no young person can pay to go on one of our expeditions. But that doesn't mean to say that those expeditions just don't cost money. And also, if we're going to, however ethically we manage to do that, there are agents who have to earn a living, whose living we would wish to support if we're going to be in a foreign country, whether that's Scotland or whether it's Iceland or whether it's Finland. So, and actually, the more ethical decisions we make, sometimes the more challenging it's going to be to find the resources to give the young people those experiences. So there's money in the pot wherever it happens. And having more cash will allow us to be able to get more young people some of those access to those experiences with greater equity. And I think we can't ignore the fact that that's one of the routes out into the wilderness, even if it's just for the lack of a pair of boots and the training and support that they need to keep them safe. But it's a great comment. I'm going to go backwards a bit because one of the comments came in very early on, which was to you, Aaron, which was, is there a particular Paralympian who you find a source of inspiration, or have found a source of inspiration?
Yes, my inspiration in terms of Paralympian was David Weir. When I was a wheelchair racer, I used to watch him, and you know, he would win the 100 meters all the way up to the marathon. The guy's an absolute machine. But rather than people that inspire me with this question, I tend to say I've got more people on my journey. I'm just thankful for their help. So when I first became a wheelchair racer, I stayed at Tanny Gray Thompson's house. She taught me how to be a wheelchair racer with her husband, Ian. My dad is my team mechanic for our club team, still comes with me and drives me home after tournaments. So I've got so many people that have supported me along my journey to help me. So I'm just so thankful to them.
And Cathy, do you ever get starstruck, or is there anyone who's still an inspiration after your early inspiration?
No. I hate this question. It's right up there with what's your favorite adventure and what's your favorite mountain. I don't have one. I don't have people and things in that sort of hierarchy. I've met lots of people who do things where I think that, oh, that's interesting. That's inspiring, or that's kind of an idea I hadn't thought about. But no. I don't kind of follow or be inspired by role models.
Well, in which case I'm going to turn the table on you, because you're going to have to cope with it the other way around now. And imagine what it would be like if a young person came up to you and said, I'd like to do what you do. So what advice would you then give to them? So imagine them being starstruck by you, or not. And then I'll ask the same of Aaron. She gets time to think about it.
I think the first thing I try and understand is, what are they actually saying? Because it's almost impossible to do what I did. It was a moment in time. And the things that got me started, it was 25 years ago, those particular opportunities are gone. So what are they actually saying? Do they really want to just climb Everest? Or are they actually saying they're looking for a way into adventure that will allow them to kind of live off their adventuring? In which case, Everest probably isn't what you want right now, because that's 20 years ago. You need to find what the current equivalent is, and it's going to be something different. So what do they actually mean by that? I think the other thing I'd really try and hammer home is how much of it is luck. And there are lots of people who've kind of hit it off as, in some form, professional adventurers, or people who are making a living off their speeches or their books or their television presenter career or something. You have to have the skills, and you have to be playing in the space to get lucky. But you can be doing all of that and not get lucky. And we don't hear that. It's only the lucky people who get to write a book about how, they crossed the Atlantic solo after their husband was pulled off the rowing boat by helicopter, and you paddled on alone because, bugging your husband, you had a boat to row. That's one of the British stories. Or mine, I was the one woman out of 200 who got to be chosen for then what turned out to be the super controversial expedition. That also mattered.
Yeah.
So
probably more questions than anything else.
Yeah, kind of. When they say like, "Oh, I want to climb Everest," like, okay, why? What's the real thing you're chasing here? Because if you just want to climb Everest, hire a guide. You can still get raised sponsorship for Everest, and off you go. If what you're really trying to say, you're trying to find a way into a life of adventure, it's a different discussion, and Everest may well not be the path.
Can I add to that, if anyone should follow you on social and see just how much fun you have when you're not doing talks or anything else? This is a woman that, who, as I said earlier, specialises in throwing herself off things, preferably with water at the bottom, and looks like she has an enormous amount of fun as well. So, Aaron, what advice would you give if a young person asked to follow you?
See, Cathy, you're so considered and really thoughtful in your answer. I wouldn't. I'd just be high-fiving them. I'd be going, "That's amazing. Let's make it happen. Yeah, brilliant." Jumping around and getting all hyper and, you know, setting up a GoFundMe page. There wouldn't have been any of the sensible parts. I think I'm going to be calling on you for advice in the future. Like, this person's asking me to do this, Cathy. You've got to help me out. I'm going to throw them off a cliff. It's not going to go well. So, no, I'm very much a just go for it kind of person. Maybe not always in a great way, but yeah. And I think that probably stems from, I guess, you know, my background and what I've spoken about, because I think it's sometimes, isn't it, like you know, I'll use the medal as the example. I'll be honest with you, we went into that tournament hoping to get a bronze medal, and sometimes, you know, you go into it hoping to get a bronze and you end up with the gold, don't you? So it doesn't always work out, but take the opportunities and see where you end up. But how many times have I get in the talk?
Isn't that kind of what Cathy was saying? That you can't know for sure.
Much more sensible and considered way. Yeah. Much more articulate than me. Just, yeah, come on, let's do it.
I think you're pretty articulate. I'm going to read out the next question to make sure that I don't miss any of it and give you both a chance to consider it. So it basically says, having a disability, this is particularly for you, I think, Aaron, having a disability can create a number of challenges to goals in life. However, you have both alluded to the fact that everyone can be challenged in a number of ways. What advice would you give to someone that is feeling challenged in terms of a personal goal?
That's kind of a massive question. I think I'm not quite sure how to answer this. I sit here holding my medal and talking about Kili and everything, but if I'm being honest, I'm probably more disabled than I let on. And there's times when I find things really challenging, and I guess I've got a lot of people around me who support me and help me with that as well. God, I set myself off again. And it isn't always plain sailing, you know. People see the Kili and the gold medal, but really, you know, I didn't get up Kili like anybody else. I had a team of 20 people. So it's just to try and, like I said, take opportunities and stay positive, because sometimes life can be cruel and it can be tough, but you always have a choice how you behave, no matter what happens to you. If you can try and do it with a smile on your face, it'll never quite seem as bad.
Thank you, Aaron. Cathy?
Without knowing anything more about kind of what the obstacles are, I think my suggestions would be possibly dial back on looking at the super successful, super inspirational people, because that may be too much and too far. And often what you're kind of ignoring the fact that they've already spent 15 years working on this. You can't compare where you are today with where they are after 15 years of work, and plus a whole bunch of, you know, advantages and lucky breaks you aren't seeing. Maybe dial back on that. Maybe look kind of more pragmatically at where you genuinely are, and that may be depressing in that it's not very far, but there'll be some things that you've got going for you, even if it's just a certain amount of dream and vision of what you would like in the future, and then try and build with that much more pragmatically. I think what helps enormously is to have a sort of a concrete plan. It's one of the reasons I don't follow a lot of inspirational people. I'm more interested in what I'm doing this weekend than in what a bunch of famous Instagram stars are doing this weekend. So focus on that, what your real practical next stages are starting this weekend and next weekend, and try and build a support team. And those of us who've got that in our parents and maybe our partner in life are very lucky, but there are a lot more Facebook groups and that kind of thing than there used to be. There are a lot of places where you can find that. You want people who go like, that's cool, I can see you doing that. And can I help you with motivation or with some ideas about money raising or just acting as support for this trip or whatever it is. Try and build a kind of team you that sees you in this space doing this thing you're imagining.
So between you, I think, have a team you trust, plan. I'm a great believer in planning. Take it one step at a time. And I might add to that, congratulate yourself for having the guts to ask the question in the first place, especially the scary famous person. I think they all bode well. Considering the unceasing global appetite for adventure when you've already achieved so much, what are you going to do next? Do you have plans? Cathy, it sounds like you always have a plan. Aaron's probably still in a complete fug of post-Olympic communications demands. I don't know, but I bet you both do have plans because that's how you stay focused on the future. Are we allowed to ask what they might be?
I really wanted to take my girls to the Japan Paralympics. When I went back in 2017, because I wanted to take them with me, I just thought how cool would it be for them to watch their daddy compete. And because they weren't there, it was amazing to watch them at home. But the next one's in Paris, and Paris, in the grand scheme of things, isn't that far away. So I think I'm on for another 3 years.
That's clear as a bell. Cathy?
Well, I've given up on kind of the big plans because COVID. But actually, I got quite a lot out of COVID in that it forced me to pay much more attention to where I've chosen to live.
Yeah.
Which is in the Pyrenees in the south of Europe. And hell, I'm very glad that I was purposeful about choosing where to live so that the things I do would be available to me really close to home. It's been such a blessing over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But the other thing that interests me is not so much to keep on doing the same thing. I've got no desire to ever go back to Everest, and I doubt I'll ever do another big Himalayan expedition either. It was interesting that, you know, I'd like to move forward. I like taking my skills and building on them. So moving them into a kind of a new environment where I'm challenged again, but I'm still building on the things I know I like and I know I'm good at. So in the last 3 years, I've taken up canyoning to a pretty serious level. That's why all the Instagram photographs are pools of water in high mountain canyons. Because it takes my rope skill and my navigation skill and my risk management skill and my mountain climbing skill and puts it in a new context. So there's going to be more of that. The other thing I've started doing more is sea kayak expeditions. I'll never live next to the sea, but I realized if I wanted to sea kayak, I've got to make it happen, even though I live in the mountains. So I'm off to Croatia at the end of this month for a week-long training camp on sea kayak skill, and got a couple of ideas as to where we go with that. But a lot does depend on travel in the next couple of years.
So plenty of plans then. So there's one more question I definitely want to ask, mainly because it would be wrong not to ask it, but it's an observation. There's a kind of clarity to both of you. You're both very honest, you're very direct. In the 5 or 6 years I've worked, I've had the privilege to be kind of custodian of British Exploring Society. I've spent my whole time hanging out with people who make stuff happen. They are fixers, they plan stuff. They have very different personalities, but a lot of them have that shared characteristic of kind of both very decent, but also just very straightforward and honest. Would you characterize a lot of the people that you've met who've overcome adversity and also kind of know who they are as a result? Is it something that you look for or recognize in other people who've achieved in the way that you both have? Or is that too uncomfortable?
Go on, Cathy.
You just got pushed to the front row.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Yes. Overall, I think that might go for a lot of people. But I've also seen adventure being used in what I suspect are unhelpful ways. I think there are people in the adventure community who are probably self-medicating mental health problems with adrenaline. And, there is suicide is not unknown among extreme adventurers. And I think it's because when they get home and the adrenaline rush of being on the cutting edge of life and death, and the mental clarity that comes with that, that's gone, and they're back with the noise that was in their head before they left on the expedition, and it's still there. And sometimes we're inspired by people who are at the absolute cutting edge of risk, and some of that may be inspiring, and some of it I think is probably less than healthy. And it doesn't always end well.
They do say that adventure is just bad planning, don't they? So thank you for being so honest. Aaron?
I think, I don't know as many adventurers as Cathy will, but I guess a lot of the people I know are incredibly competitive to get to where they've got to in their sport. But I think the common theme around lots of the people I see is they don't necessarily see barriers as barriers. They'll say, we need to make this happen, let's make it happen. And, and they've got that kind of positive outlook, which tends to make things happen. I think if you're positive and you push for something, you're much more likely than going, oh gosh, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? Don't worry about that. Just steamroller through it and see where it goes. Really interesting guy. The Listen Speak actually talks about goals a lot. There's a gentleman called David Heiner, if anyone's interested in that kind of way of thinking, because he's got some really interesting things to say.
It can be quite challenging people to be around if you're not wired in the same way. Aaron, this is specifically a question for you. It says, it's from one of our fireside guests tonight, saying, we have similar hands, but from different experiences. Do you find people making assumptions regarding your disability or ability, and how do you respond to those people?
Yeah, you do. I think I've been in the Paralympic bubble for a few weeks now, so it's kind of the other way. People keep calling us superhumans, which is lovely, but no, you do. I've been patted on my head in my wheelchair. My wheelchair doesn't have any handles on it, so people can't push me across the road. There's all sorts to say about this, but I think it's getting better. And I think I go back to what I said about the people I met at the games. We are so far along this journey in the UK that I think things are really changing, but it's not the same all around the world. So we're very, very fortunate where we live. I tend to make a joke of things, and I think that that's the way I break the ice, and that's definitely as a team, as a wheelchair rugby team, how we cope as well, that we use humour to our advantage in that sense, and that tends to put people at ease.
Annoyingly, it's 8 o'clock. And that means that we only got to keep you for an hour. So much though I'm sure our audience would like us to continue as well, I'm now going to move towards rolling up, because it feels like a good moment to end the evening, if that's okay. It's been completely amazing. Just before we finish, I'd like to say a little bit about one young person who came on expedition with us, and I've been thinking about her during the course of the evening, just because she's a perfect example of some of the things you've been talking about tonight. She joined us virtually last year, because we weren't running any expeditions through COVID, through our virtual continent called Wildestan. And she had communication challenges, so she joined us with the screen turned off and the sound turned off. In fact, I think another member of her family even booked her attendance on the adventures because she didn't feel comfortable doing that. But by the end of the season of adventures, she had a screen on, she was joining in and asking loads of questions. And this year, she joined us on expedition in the Highlands of Scotland. And according to her grown-up sister, she literally doesn't recognise her, and described the experience of finding herself through that contact with like-minded people and tackling challenge in a controlled way in the Highlands as being probably one of the most transformative things in her life. And that makes everything we do worthwhile. It's why meeting people like you is so important, and getting more people around the campfire to help us and understand that the work that we do is so important. And if you'd like to hear more about the work that we're doing, please get in touch. We're actually doing a lot of work at the moment, focusing on widening access. And we're currently tackling a 10-year strategy, which is considering how we accelerate our carbon resilience. And that's work that we started in 2019. We're also looking at our carbon heritage, which is tougher still, and greater inequity and inclusion in our work. So tonight is relevant across all of those. So the contribution of tonight and conversations we've been having are incredibly relevant, and look out for more if you're interested. Marvin Rees, our president, will be delivering his second president's address at the end of October this year. It's a closed event, but we do hope to share parts of the recording afterwards. And Marvin's going to be talking about the importance of bringing together more diverse voices with the confidence they need to be the way that they want to be, and in order to secure a sustainable future for us all. So it's going to be a theme for the whole of this autumn. On that note, and without further ado, I'd like to thank you all for joining us, but most particularly Cathy and Aaron. It's been such a pleasure to spend time with you. You are, as I thought you would be, disarmingly frank, ridiculously good company, and I hope we get some more chance to speak to you too. And I can't thank you enough for the time you've spent with us. And to our audience tonight, I wish you a very good evening. Thank you very much.